Hello and welcome. We are starting a session here where we are with PJ Ausdenmore from The Romance Dish. And you're probably noticing that PJ and I are twins. And we'll tell you a little bit more about our sisterhood as we have our conversation. But I'm very excited to include a conversation about book reviews and an amazing book review site that has been a big advocate to romance writers and readers for many years. And I'm so thankful to have PJ with us today. My name is Nikki Salcedo. I am the conference chair of Moonlight and Magnolias, and I am a past president of Georgia Romance Writers. I'm an active participant in a variety of writing communities across the country. And especially in our virtual world, we have lots of opportunities to meet writers everywhere. And I have two presentations in the conference on building characters and also a mental health presentation, how we can keep writing when the world gets tough. And I am so excited about my conversation right now with PJ. I'm going to tell you a little bit about her, and then we're going to dive into our conversation. PJ Ausdenmore has been sharing her love of romance since discovering the books of Victoria and Mary Stewart upon her first foray into the adult section of her public library at the age of 14. With a penchant for both writing and reading, it was natural that following a career in banking, she would return to the love that she shared. She would return to that love of sharing in her retirement. She began reviewing in 2007 and with three friends created The Romance Dish in 2009, a blog which she has run on her own since 2015. Her introduction to romance came via historical stories, but now she reads a variety of subgenres, enjoying pushing the boundaries of her reading and sharing these experiences with others. PJ lives in North Carolina and in traveling, cooking, and of course, books. And if you're ever lucky enough to get her holiday cookies, you are well worth a friendship with PJ. So welcome to Moonlight and Magnolias, PJ. My first question is, what really happened in that foray into the library at age 14?
Thank you, Nikki. It's lovely to be here. Moonlight Magnolias holds a very special place in my heart. So I'm glad to have this conversation with you. So I was 14. I grew up in a very small Midwestern town. I had read pretty much everything in the children's section of my local public library. And one day I decided to, for lack of a better word, sneak into the adult section and see what they had to offer. I stumbled upon the books of Victoria Holt and Mary Stewart, and I was captivated. I picked one out. I don't remember the first one. I think it might have been Mistress of Malin by Victoria Holt. And I took it up to the desk, handed over my library card, and was so excited to check it out, and was informed that I could not do so because it was an adult book and I was not an adult. So discouraged, I left the library. I walked 2 blocks down Main Street to my dad's office. I happened to catch him without a client, told him what had happened. He walked me 2 blocks back down Main Street to the public library and informed that librarian that I could check out any book I wanted to read. He and my mom had always encouraged us to be readers and to have a love of books, and he was not about to discourage me. So that was my introduction to romance, thanks to my dad.
So he sounds like a hero.
He was.
That's what a hero would do. So I love that the world of books was opened up to you by your parents, and that was at the age of 14.
Yes.
And what's happened with your love of books since then?
It has just grown and grown and grown. It really knows no limits.
And I first met you in 2008. I was also the conference chair, I believe, of Moonlight and Magnolias. They tricked me into doing it again. 2008. I believe our keynote speaker was Julia Quinn.
Yes, it was.
And you and I had never We did not know each other.
Oh.
We had never seen each other.
Nope.
And we laid eyes on each other and we said, we look like sisters.
You said it.
We look like sisters.
I walked into the room where all of the auction items were,
Mm-hmm.
and you were manning the desk. And Gannon, who a friend who, right, was with me, and we started talking about shoes. I don't know why or how, but we did. And then we moved on to books, and then we just connected.
We just connected.
And we became conference twins.
Yes, we're conference twins. You've been my sister for many years.
And I could not ask for a better one.
Same here. I'm thankful that you've been part of our writing community. A lot of times we have presenters who are authors or editors, book coaches. I think it's so important to talk to somebody who loves reading the book. So PJ, I'd love to know about the first time we met back in 2008, when Julia Quinn was the keynote speaker. What had brought you to Moonlight and Magnolias?
Well, at that time, I was reviewing for another site called Romance Novel TV. I was interested in meeting authors, obviously, because I was reviewing many of their books. And I was also interested in learning and improving my craft in writing, because even though I don't write books, I do write reviews of books. And there are many workshops that Moonlight Magnolias offers that I felt I could benefit from. So that's what brought me there in 2008.
And then we were nice enough to you that you thought you'd come back in 2009.
Yes.
And what happened then?
Well, 4 of us who were reviewing for Romance Novel TV at that time decided to attend Moonlight and Magnolias. We had met each other online, conversed many times, but we had only 2 of us had met in person. So we all came to the conference, and about 3 weeks before M&M, we were notified that the site that we had been reviewing for was going to close. So we arrived at the conference knowing that our reviewing gig was over, but not ready to stop reviewing.
Mm-hmm.
And so that year, we took full advantage of everything that M&M had to offer. And over the weekend of the conference, we conceived the idea of opening our own blog site. We came up with the name, which is The Romance Dish. We came up with the concept of how we were going to set it up. We sketched out our first month's schedule. We got input and advice and assistance from many of the authors attending Moonlight Magnolias. And a little over a month later, we went live with The Romance Dish.
And are you surprised at the success?
Yes. I guess the first surprise came right out of the box when our very first post on our very first day, we had over 400 comments. Now, we knew that was not going to last, obviously, but we were blown away by the response that we got. And each year that the blog continues and readers keep coming back and authors keep asking if they can visit, I'm just continually amazed that it still is doing well, and I'm still having a blast with it.
Well, for those of us reading, we have a blast because you do a wonderful job of covering a cross section of types of books. So some readers, we get caught up in just our little subgenre, but you really cover everything.
That's intentional.
Okay, tell me about that.
Because I do, prior to reviewing, well, I started out as a historical romance reader.
Mm-hmm.
And then several years later, a historical romance author who I enjoyed, started writing a contemporary romantic suspense series because I enjoyed her writing. I followed her into that subgenre and found that I liked it a lot. And then another author I was reading transitioned to straight contemporary, and I did the same thing. I followed her. Another one I followed into paranormal. And I began to discover so many wonderful authors writing so many interesting, entertaining books in a variety of genres. And so that's what I try to bring to the readers who visit the Romance Dish. I want to introduce them to new authors and to new books within the parameters of what they enjoy reading. Mm-hmm. But I also want to broaden those horizons. I want to introduce them to perhaps an author of color that they would not have picked up before. Or I want to introduce them to maybe a women's fiction novel that they've not read before. I want to give them a variety, and I want to help them stretch in their reading. So I'm glad you've mentioned that, because that means hopefully maybe I'm doing my job well.
Well, you do your job exceptionally well. It's part of why I thought it would be great to talk to you, because you're a professional. You take reviewing books seriously.
I do.
You respect the craft of writing. You respect authors. And in my opinion, when I read your reviews and the reviews on your site, or even author interviews, they're done with a lot of care.
They are.
So thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for loving us. I've always said that. Thank you for loving us, authors. But writing reviews is not easy.
It isn't easy. And I do try to keep it professional. I mean, there are some reviews where I just say right up front, okay, guys, I'm going to gush here because I loved this book so much. And I will. But I try to balance the reviews. I try to give a good critical review of the book, but also sharing my enthusiasm for the book. And even if a book doesn't work for me, I can almost always find good things about that book. And just because it doesn't work for me doesn't mean it won't work for someone else. So I try to put out an objective review of the book, and hopefully someone out there is going to read that and think, I'm going to take a chance on that book because that sounds like something I would enjoy.
It's a great talent. Hand selling a book, having a friend recommend a book is probably the best way I've found books in the past. Mm-hmm. And I have read a book that I did not like, that I knew somebody else would love. Mm-hmm. And I have introduced friends to authors or series that aren't for me necessarily. Mm-hmm. But it makes me so happy to know that somebody loves a book, even if it's a book I don't love.
I feel the same way because I know the amount of effort and heart that the author has put into writing that book. Mm-hmm. And there is a reader for every book. I might not be that reader, but someone who comes to my blog and reads my review might be that reader. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I try to give a good cross-section of reviews and not just focus on one type of book. And that goes for, historical versus contemporary versus paranormal. It goes for heat level. Some readers, want to see everything behind closed doors. Mm-hmm. Some readers want it hot and explicit. Mm-hmm. So just because it may work or not work for me doesn't mean it won't work for you, the reader out there. So I try to do a variety, and I try to give the readers a good idea of what the book is about without giving away spoilers. Mm-hmm. And just share, what worked for me for the book, and hopefully that book will then find a home with a reader or readers out there.
Well, thank you for that. And before we started recording, I asked you about some books that you've loved, and you chastised me for saying favorite. And I always caveat a favorite, not one favorite, a favorite.
Yeah.
But you used the phrase comfort read.
Yes.
And so I'd love to know what your comfort read might be.
Okay. So for me, a comfort read is a book that will always lift my spirits. It doesn't matter how many times I've read it. It doesn't matter that I can probably quote dialogue verbatim. If I'm feeling down, if life is taking a toll on me, if I'm sick, if I'm grieving, if I'm worried, whatever is going on in my life, if that book can lift my spirits and pull me out of that, if only for a short amount of time, then that for me is a comfort read. And the book that without failure does that for me every single time is Saving Grace by Julie Garwood. It is a book that I read shortly after it was published, and it just resonated with me. I laughed, I cried, I cheered. I just love that book. And I read it usually at least once a year, and have every year since it was published, which is several years. I'm now on my third paperback copy because I've worn the other ones out and the pages have fallen out. But it's just one of those books that makes me feel good.
Okay, that's amazing. Now I'm looking over my shoulder into my Garwood section.
Are we twinning here?
I have a really good Julie Garwood section. So it's actually my bookcase. I have a bookcase too, just behind my computer screen. There are a couple of her books that just I can find no flaw with.
Yeah.
And I think they were the first books where the heroes were sweet. They were alpha, A minus. There was a sweetness in some of the stories. So yours is Saving Grace. I'm going to say mine was The Secret.
Oh, that's a good one.
And in my AP English class in high school, we were instructed to write, everyone's reading, Brave New World, Cry the Beloved Country, whatever. And I went to my teacher and I said, I want to write my senior project on a romance novel. And she grudgingly allowed me. And I wrote about the importance of female friendships in Julie Garwood's The Secret. She had a best friend. And my teacher gave me an A+. She said, there's like I probably have it in a box somewhere, but she could tell, I was a good read. I read everything. I did read Cry the Beloved Country and all the literary stuff. But she saw that I could find really interesting parts of the story that weren't the hero and the heroine falling in love. There were other parts of these books. All of these books are filled with many things, not just love. So we have the same comfort author.
I love that.
And you have, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, when I was reviewing at Romance Novel TV, they asked the reviewers to each write a post about their favorite romance heroine. And I wrote my post on Joanna, who was the heroine of Saving Grace. And I've not had the pleasure of meeting Julie Garwood. I know she was at Romantic Times conference in Kansas City several years ago, but I was not able to go that year. So I've never had that pleasure, but I took a flyer and I emailed her and I told her what I was doing and how much that book meant to me. And I asked her how she came up with the character of Joanna, and if she would be willing to answer a few questions for me. And she responded.
Really?
I was just like, oh my gosh. She was so gracious, and she talked to me about the process, her thought process in writing that book, and about a domestic abuse shelter in her area, and the stories of the women there, and how that had inspired her to write this book, because the heroine of Saving Grace in her first marriage is physically and emotionally abused by her husband. And it's a romance, but it's also a story of, it's her journey. It's her growth, it's her empowerment throughout the course of the novel. And so that was a treat. That's one of my romance highlights.
I bet it was a treat for her getting the message too from you.
I'd like to think so.
It's nice to know. And I'm sure she gets lots of accolades, but it's still nice that she responded. Is amazing.
She did. And answered my questions. I mean, she was very gracious.
So I see Saving Grace is actually behind you, but you have some other books. So
I do.
What are some new books that have really kind of gotten you excited about reading?
Well, this year, I have a few favorite authors have ventured off onto new paths. One of those authors is Mary Bly, who your viewers may or may not know, also writes historical romance under the pen name of Eloisa James. This is a book that was 4 years in the making. It is Lizzie and Dante. It's contemporary fiction. It is a love story, but it's not a romance novel. So romance novel conventions are not necessarily at play here. I expected this book to break my heart, quite honestly, because it's clearly stated, it's not a spoiler, that the female protagonist is battling stage 4 cancer. So I expected grief, I expected heartbreak, I expected copious amounts of tears. I read it with a box of Kleenex at my side. It's a beautifully, beautifully written book with a very deeply romantic love story. And it's actually more than one love story. There's love between friends. There's parental love. There's just once in a lifetime romantic love. There's love among chosen family. And I cried. I did. I cried.
Yeah.
But I did not expect to turn that final page of the book feeling uplifted and hopeful and grateful for life and determined to live every day that I'm blessed to be given with an open, joyful heart. It is such a beautiful book, and it surprised me in all the best ways. So that's one.
That's great to hear, because some of us are familiar with the other writing of Eloisa James and her interesting life and her lineage. So love when an author ventures into new territory. Sometimes they find their voice in a different way.
They do. And I think, I don't know if she'll write, if this will be a one and done, or if she'll write another contemporary fiction novel, but she definitely has a voice in that genre.
Excellent. We're going to check that one out. And now you're reaching for our keynote speaker, Vanessa Riley.
Yes. So I actually bought this morning. I've already read it. I bought a digital copy when it was released, but I discovered yesterday that on her way through North Carolina to a festival in another part of the state, she stopped at my local indie bookstore and signed books.
Wow.
So I immediately called my bookstore and said, "Will you hold me a signed copy?" And I went by this morning and picked up my very own signed keeper copy of Island Queen by Vanessa Riley. This book, I was so enthralled with this story. In 2019, I attended RWA's national conference in New York City. And late one night, I went across the alleyway behind the hotel to Junior's for cheesecake.
Yes.
And Vanessa was a member of the small group of us that walked over there. And that night she told us about this fascinating woman that she had discovered while doing research, and that she wanted to write her story. And this is that book that she told us about that night. So of course I grabbed it immediately as soon as I could. She has a gift. This is such a beautiful book, and I highly recommend it to everyone. Even if you don't normally read historical fiction.
Yeah.
Again, it's the woman's journey,
mm-hmm.
and it's so enthralling. You had asked me about trends, and I think one of the trends that I've been most excited about is the number of authors who are dipping their writing fingers into women's fiction or historical fiction, where the main focus of that book is a woman's journey. At this point in my life, where I have a lot of life experience behind me, I think that particular topic really resonates with me. I find it fascinating. I find it empowering, and I love the books that are coming out now from authors who are writing with that female protagonist in mind. I love romance. I still love romance. I'll always love romance, but this is like an added layer to my reading that I really am enjoying immensely.
Absolutely. I think I have a copy. Can you see? It's the top book on my shelf right there.
I see it, but I can't read it.
Yeah, I have a Tribble back there, so don't worry about the Star Trek stuff. But
okay.
Vanessa Riley's book, Island Queen. What I think is interesting about those stories is, like you said, we've lived a certain amount of life. I think we keep tragedy and grief and certain things quite private, right?
Yes.
Just the happy stuff, and here's my cats and whatever. And it is important to read stories where we see different types of challenges. We do not have the challenge that Dottie or Dorothy goes through in that book. Like you and I aren't going to experience that.
No.
But we can relate to it. And I always think we don't know what our great-great-great-grandmothers, like we don't know the journeys. Our grandmothers got on ships and came from all different places. And so those stories can be challenging, but also like strengthening. So I'm glad you like that.
Absolutely. This is a book that is another favorite from this year, and it's The Paris Apartment by Kelly Bowen, who is a historical romance author. But this is a dual timeline, present day and World War II novel that speaks to what you were just saying, because the present day female lead in this book is her grandmother has always been distant from her emotionally. She doesn't know a lot about her grandmother's life outside of the years, since she was born. She doesn't know what happened prior to her birth. Her grandmother dies, and the young woman inherits an apartment in Paris that belonged to her grandmother. She has no idea that her grandmother ever lived in Paris. And it turns out her grandmother lived in Paris during the Nazi occupation. And as the story unfolds, the young woman begins to learn about her grandmother and her grandmother's life and the heritage that this woman has handed down to her that she had not been aware of prior to inheriting this apartment. It's a fascinating read, and really speaks to that connection that some of us are lucky enough to have with our ancestors, and others of us don't have at all.
And sometimes it's easy just to believe whatever we knew at the end of someone's life is the sum total. And I always like to think, my mom used to be a 10-year-old girl running with pigtails.
Yeah.
My dad used to be a kid who would go down, to the stream and play, in the water. But it's too easy to remember them just kind of stuck at an older age when they had a vibrant whole life.
Yes. And I love these books that are bringing that forward and showing characters who are discovering and exploring those lives that they had known nothing about, and really meeting their grandparents or meeting, their ancestors for the first time almost.
Yeah.
Because they didn't know them as that young person. They didn't know them as that young woman in 1942 who may have been working with the Allies or may have been a Nazi collaborator. And it all unfolds in the book, and it's really a very well written novel. I highly recommend it.
We'll check that one out. The past used to be far, far past, medieval castles and Vikings, but now the past is very close. The past is getting really close.
I saw a tweet the other day where an author was sharing the fact that a reader was complaining that there were not enough historical romances. And she said, well, what era are you, looking for? Because there are a lot of historical romance out. She says, well, like the 80s and 90s. Okay. 1980s and 1990s.
Yeah.
So it's all a matter of perspective, I guess.
It is all a matter of perspective, but you're also reading some contemporary books. So
I am.
Tell me about one that you like there.
Okay. Farah Rashan. Have you read?
I haven't. Wait, no, this one.
This is the second book.
And I read the first book.
Yes, The Boyfriend Project was the first book. It was one of my top books of 2020. This is book number 2, and I liked it even more. It speaks to all of my likes because I'm a football addict, and the hero is a former college and pro football player who has been injured, trying to make a comeback. The heroine is a trainer, and he hires her to secretly train him. There's a wonderful depth of emotion in this book. There is unresolved grief. There are multiple layers to both of them. The female friendship that began in the first book among the 3 women who discovered they were dating the same jerk, that continues to evolve and deepen. And really, it's a side-by-side story. The romance, obviously, it's a contemporary romance. The romance is front and center, but right beside the romance is this evolving relationship among the three women. And it's just, yeah, I loved it. It's another wonderful book, and I'm so looking forward to the third book. I have no idea who the hero is going to be, though I have maybe an idea, possibly, but I don't know if it's correct or not. But yeah, this is one that I highly recommend to anyone who likes contemporary romance, who likes diverse romance. It's just romance. So well written.
Yeah.
Sports romance, all of it. Yeah. Female friendships and romance. She covers
That's my thing. I love a female friendship.
Anybody who loves Disney. That's that one. And then let me see. Oh, one more. I don't have this in, well, actually two more. And then I'll the first one is another contemporary. And this one does not come out until the end of October. So I don't have it in print yet, but I have a picture of it. It is Christmas in Rose Bend. Can you see that okay?
Yeah, go back a little bit. Okay.
It's Christmas in Rose Bend. It's by Naima Simone, who is one of my favorite. This woman, she just slays me with her writing. She is, it's just so beautifully written and emotional and multi-layered. And this is the second book in a new series that she has. Most of her writing has been in, Harlequin Desires. She has a lot of really terrific series.
Contemporary, yeah.
Yes. This is a full-length contemporary novel. This is not a category novel.
In a small town.
In a small town.
Yeah.
It's just, wow. I just love it. And this one is very emotional. Again, there's grief, there's some PTSD, there's complicated family relationships, there's just sexy, all-encompassing.
Miss Simone is always going to give us something a little sexy. She's usually my partner in crime on the dance floor at Moonlight and Magnolias.
Yeah, this one is just, it has a prickly heroine and a big teddy bear of a hero. And a secondary, very important secondary character, who I also, a young teen secondary character who is also very instrumental in the storyline and who I adored. So yeah, I highly recommend that
on the list.
That comes out it's Christmas in Rose Bend, and it comes out the end of October. And then my last one, because I could go on.
I know.
And on.
I know.
And there are a couple more that I really did enjoy this year. But the last one I'll bring up, and let me pull up a picture of it, comes out the end of November. And it is by Julianne Long.
Oh, she's a longtime favorite of yours.
She is.
Yeah.
And it is After Dark with the Duke.
Okay. Yep.
Okay. And it is in her Palace of Rogues series, which is the current series that she's writing. It's the fourth book. Standalone novel. You do not have to have read the earlier books to read this one. Again, her writing is so thoughtful and so exquisite. She just has this command of language that I am in awe of. And this book is character driven. It takes place almost entirely within the boarding house where this series is set. And it is between a very prim, proper, straight-laced, by the rules Duke, who was living there temporarily while repairs are done at his home, and an actress who has been vilified by the press and is hiding out in the boarding house. There are so many layers to both of them, and the journey that they take is just, I underline, I found myself underlining more past so many passages. It was like, I'm never going to finish this book because I was spending so much time just underlining all
You
these
underlined every
beautiful
single
passages. It's an exquisite book, and I like you said, I'm a fan of hers. Not every book of hers has worked that, you know, for me. Some have been top dish reviews. Some have been 3.5 to 4-star reviews. Most of them I have enjoyed. This one, I think, is one of the best she's ever written.
Oh, wow.
And she's been writing for like 20 years, publishing for 20 years. I think it's probably in my top 2 books of everything she's written. It's just a beautiful, beautiful story. And the character development, just, yeah, amazing. I loved it.
Something that you've said a few times, I just want to tap into what you notice as a reader. You notice the actual words, so the quality of the writing. You notice layering, so a story that has some complexity, not just, good versus evil,
Right.
Bickering then falls in love, and you want to go on a journey. So part of why I wanted to speak with you, as we have lots of different types of writers at this conference, some are newer, some are more experienced, really the importance of thinking about the end reader, thinking about who's going to read, but putting that effort into our stories to really make it come alive. You just showed 5, maybe 6 books, and you said similar words of layering, complexity, emotion, journey. And that's what we need to do as writers, is think about how we can bring our best writing forward for you, for you.
I will say that there are times when I just want a light, airy, funny, good read, where I don't want to have to dig into emotions. And so there's a place definitely for those books. But I also really enjoy digging into those complexities and the emotions and being taken on a journey. I want a story that holds my interest, and I want characters that engage my emotions.
Absolutely.
I want to feel something.
Some people read books. I'm always curious about these types of people, and then they will never read the book again. But I feel like I am always looking for a book that I want to read again. And there's probably have dozens and dozens of books that I would reread, but absolutely agree with you. I enjoy quick reads, light, funny, but a book that I'm going to keep coming back to probably has some of those layers.
Yeah. I've read your book more than once. Your debut.
Oh,
I have.
Well, that makes
because it was complex, and it was layered, and it took me on a journey, and it made me feel deep emotions. And I'll go back to those books. I don't reread a lot of books because I do read so many books. There just isn't enough time.
Yeah.
But books that really touched me, like yours did, or the one that I just mentioned by Julianne Long, the upcoming book at the end of November, books that really, really have an impact, an emotional impact on me. I will tend to go back and reread. Now it might be 2 years, it might be 3 years after
Yeah.
the first reading, but they pull me back and I want to re-experience that.
Yeah. I'll open a Julie Garwood or maybe like a favorite part of a Judith McNaught, and I'll actually just read a paragraph and close the book and put it, I don't even reread the whole book beginning to end. Sometimes I'll just open it up to, when was the first time he saw her? When was the time when this tragedy happened? I'll just read that section, and that's so
Jane
great.
Ann Krantz, who has written hundreds of books under all three of her names. She has a contemporary called Trust Me. And I will do that same thing with that book. I'll go back and I'll read a favorite chapter or a favorite passage or a couple of chapters, maybe not the whole book, but just pieces of it that I particularly enjoyed. Yeah, I mean, there are those books, they just speak to us.
Definitely. Well, I would love for just a couple of closing comments, which is how to encourage authors to have good behavior with reviewers. So if you have just any tidbits, and I always say, and I did have a did not finish review from a fairly popular review site. And I wrote the reviewer and I said, thank you for trying to read my book. Like, I just, as you know, I'm a little bit too Southern. I'm always going to say thank you. But what advice do you have for authors?
I think what you did is fine. I do have authors who will do that with me sometimes, or they will post the review. They'll just say, you know, thank you for reviewing my book, or if it's a good review, I'm glad you enjoyed my book. And I think that's fine. I would strongly recommend not engaging with readers who did not enjoy your book. Because not every reader is going to enjoy every book. I would also say, and whether or not you read the reviews of your books, it is a very personal, individual decision. But if you do read them, try not to get too discouraged by the reviews that are not 4 and 5 stars.
Yeah.
Because I know many readers who will purposely seek out those 2 and 3 star reviews to find out what didn't work for the reviewer. And I know there are 2-star reviews out there that might say, this book has too much sex. There, you know, nobody's having sex this much. There's no reason for it to be on the page, you know, 2 stars. And another reader is going to come along and go, oh, too much sex. That's my catnip. 1 click, you know, and the same with the reverse. A reader might say, you know, this book's not realistic. All they did was hold hands and, you know, and a gentle kiss. Well, there's reader out there who's going to say, I love that. I don't need the in your face explicit sex. Take it behind the closed doors. Give me the emotion. There's a reader for every book, and try to keep that in mind when you do see the reviews for your books, because there are readers out there who will love your book and who will appreciate all of the effort that you put into that book. But please do not engage them, because you'll never win in that situation. Yeah,
I think that's great advice. Our job is to write as much as we can, write as well as we can, have fun with writing.
Yeah. I will say, however, if you are going on to like if you're a guest at my site at the Romance Dish and we're doing an author Q&A, or you've written a guest post for the blog, please feel free to come on the blog to engage with the readers,
Yes.
because they will love that. And that will make them feel more invested in you and in your book, and probably more likely to go out and buy your book. They enjoy when I post a Q&A, and they enjoy when I post a guest post from an author. But if the author is actually on there engaging with them in the comments, then that just boosts their investment in your books so much higher. So in that situation, yes, please do engage.
Yes. Engage nicely.
Yes.
Engage nicely.
Yeah.
And if and this isn't just for book reviews, but even if I see a post online and it's something that makes me feel unhappy, I actually just delete it or hide it. And I just keep going. Like, everything that upsets me isn't necessarily something worth me talking about.
My grandmother taught me from a very young age, if you have nothing nice to say nothing at all.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the rule I've lived by, or tried to live by.
That's a good one. In my house, I say be a zero, so neutral, or a positive. Don't be a negative. So you could be nothing or positive, but as soon as you're a negative, no, that is not allowed.
No. And that's why even when a book doesn't work for me that I'm reviewing, I always try to find the positives in that book.
Yeah.
I always try to leave the reader with some positives, even if the book overall doesn't work for me, because I know it will work for someone.
Excellent. Well, we can find you on, tell us the name of the site again.
You can find me at theromancedish.com. You can also find me on Twitter at The Romance Dish, Instagram at The Romance Dish, and Facebook at The Romance Dish.
I don't know if I knew your Instagram, so I will find you there too. And we're just so happy that you were part of this romance community. I hope lots of our attendees will go out and read your reviews. I think reading your reviews are helpful as a writer. You talked about sitting in writing craft classes, but I think as writers, we can learn from reviewers as well. So
thank you.
I want our attendees to meet you online, see your wonderful reviews, look for these great books you've recommended, and then they cannot be your twin or sister like I am, but maybe they will be a good friend to you as well.
Thank you, Nikki.
It has been a great pleasure. I hope that maybe next year I'll see you in person. That's my wish for everybody.
So. I hope so.
If I ever start traveling for work again, I have seen you in my business travels. So I hope if I am able to travel.
You are always welcome here.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you again. I hope you have a great day.
Thank you so much, Nikki. Bye-bye.
Bye.